Hi, Phil Aston here from Now Spinning Magazine with another look back at a classic album, and this one is Deep Purple in rock. And because I'm aware that many videos have already done this and been there and bought the t-shirt, although I haven't got an in rock t-shirt, so I'm here in my Riverside t-shirt, is I'm going to look back at this album and talk about it when I first heard it for the first time. So we're getting ready to get back in a time machine and head back to the UK in the early 70s, which is a very dark and distant time and place. But as I go through this, we're going to see the cassette, we're going to see a little badge type thing, the single, the CD, that's the one to get, the songbook, and a book called Waiting for the Ricochet, which is essential for fans of this record. How did I find this? How did I buy it even? What happened? Well, as I was on a staple diet of Sweet, T-Rex and Slade, and just edging out into status quo in the world of rock, a friend across the road from me said I needed to listen to progressive rock music. Wasn't really heavy metal then, or heavy rock, it was just called progressive rock, progressive band. And I've mentioned this before, I think, you know, he lent me Emerson, Lake and Palmer, I think it was Tarkus and Machine Head and Roxy music, and they're all on cassette, because in those days, teenagers, young teenagers, we were like cassette players. We didn't have record players because our dads didn't really want us going near their Dynatron music centres. And I didn't really understand the old Roxy music really, but I understood Deep Purple immediately as I pressed play. And so when I decided with my little bit of pocket money I was going to get into the world of owning music, I thought I'm going to buy a record. Like my friends are buying records, I should be buying records. So I think I was about 13 or 14, I think. So I'd saved up, and I was still at an age where I just went out when my mum and dad went around the shops. So if they didn't go around the shops, I didn't go out because I didn't really like shops. But that was all about to change because of music. And so we used to go to this department store in Solihull on the South Birmingham, and it was a department store called Beatties. Beatties was part of John Lewis. So it was a department store that sold everything from saucepans to clothes to you know, paint tins, everything, and it had like a cafe on the top floor, and next to the cafe was the music bit. And music departments in those days were like lots of wood panels, and you know, and you could go and listen to stuff if you like, but I hadn't got the nerve for that. And anyway, I was in the cassette section, you know, racks of cassettes, and so I was looking for Machine Head, and they hadn't got it. I suppose Beatties was not the kind of shop that was going to stock lots of rock stuff, but this was in the racks. So I went up and said, "Do you have Machine Head by Deep Purple?" And they went, "No, but we have in rock by them." I can't remember how much it was. It was £2 or something like that. And so I looked at it, and because there's nothing to look at, is there? And I thought, I wanted Machine Head, but I don't want to go. I've so built myself up to buying a record and going home and saying, I own an album to my friends. I own one album I have an album that I bought it. And that was it. And as you'll see when I go through the different stuff, the track listing was complete opposite to the vinyl. So side 2 was side 1 and side 1 was side 2. So it opens with Flight of the Rat. I would soon begin to think that with Deep Purple there was some mystical reason why everything they ever did had 7 tracks on it, 3 tracks on one side and 4 on the other. If you think about it, from In Rock right through to Who Do We Think We Are, that was the format that they followed. Even the live double, Men in Japan, only had 7 tracks on it. But regardless of that, I played it and I just thought it was amazing, because although Machine Head had got me straight away, this sounded like a completely different thing. It really did. And in my young brain, I was trying to I was interested in how loud and how, not obnoxious, but the cacophony of guitars, bass and drums, the noise they could make that would make my parents worry. Because, you know, in those days, whereas nowadays dads and sons will go to the same concerts, but then it was such an alien thing. You almost wanted your parents to go, what the hell is that you're listening to? On side 2 of the cassette, or side 1 of the vinyl album, lived a song called Speed King. Now, if you're in the USA, you're now going to go, what the hell is he talking about? Because on the USA version, the bit I'm about to describe was not on it. They took it off because they thought it would actually hamper radio play of the album. And Speed King starts with a crash ending, the way songs ended live, with just drums, bass, guitars, just making an absolute row. An exciting noise, cacophony of tremolo arm, tortured Strats and Hammond, although this was a Gibson 335 on this, but regardless, lots of just stuff. That to me was the calling card that meant that this band would forever be in my heart, because I remember when my dad came upstairs to my room and said, so you bought a record, we bought cassettes, you know, yes, and what is it you've bought? And I just went, press play, and Speed King came on. I don't think he lasted more than 10 seconds before walking out and shouting to my mum saying, what the hell has happened to Phil? What's happened to our son? Because it was just so not Perry Como. It was incredible. And the way it goes into that discordant start, and it just moves into John Lord's held Hammond, you know, like church organ. It was just fantastic, wasn't it? And then it goes into the riff and the song, and then we've got the guitar solo and the lovely bass and sound and everything. It just, I just loved it. Just absolutely loved it. Now, there's something about in rock that made it sound like it was from its own time. I mean, this is the birth of heavy metal, isn't it, in a way? You know, there's Led Zeppelin, Sabbath, and Uriah Heep, sort of, but they were still kind of, still had one leg in the 60s, really. But Deep Purple in rock was different to me. It was a grungy, heavy rock album that, because it had keyboards, that set them apart, and the songs were fast and furious, and this didn't let up. And well, fast and furious, some were, but they were different to Zeppelin and Sabbath. And to me, they were the most exciting rock band I'd ever heard in my life. I had no idea, apart from that, which of course, having the cassette, I didn't even know there was pictures on the inner sleeve. That's all I knew. And even on the tape version of Machine Head, which I got next, there was that blurred picture on the front and no pictures. I didn't even know what this band looked like. I didn't know what I hadn't started buying sounds with melody. I did no idea what they were like. In school discos, Black Knight was being played, but I didn't, there was a mystery. There's a complete mystery. I mean, on cassette, it just says compositions by Blackmore, Gillan, Glover, Lord Pace. Didn't even say the first names. Just the music. I just had the music. Bloodsucker had this great tremolo. I was really into the tremolo arm, the way of playing the guitar that wasn't conventional, whereas the other guitarists I was listening to, they seemed to play like fairly normally, but whoever this person was, I presume it was someone called Blackmore, he played as if he was trying to kill the beast. He was trying to literally pull it apart. Child in Time. Definitive version, is it made in Japan? Possibly. But this version, the way that Gillan draws up those screams to that crescendo, put the fear of God into parents across the world. And the other thing that I would realise many years later, because I went backwards and forwards with Purple stuff, and it was years later I realised there'd been a version of Deep Purple prior to this, the Mark 1, is that the musicology section now, is the guitar solo in Child in Time is a masterclass in control and speed and dynamics and excitement and just jaw-dropping awesomeness. Whatever, to me, whatever Page or Amy or whatever else was doing, what happened on this set me up for life. But what is amazing is that if you listen to Blackmore from literally just 18 months before or whatever, his guitar playing on Ring That Neck and stuff like that, it sounds like a different bloke. It sounds like he went from there to this in such a short period of time. And of course, from here to Machine Head and Burn, his style was developing all the time, but absolutely incredible. This gets confusing now because I had the cassette version, but anyway, over on side 2 or side 1 with this was Flight to the Rat, which again was a track that never transferred live, unfortunately. I think they tried it several times, even with Steve Morse. But it's a brilliant track and a simple riff, but the instrumental sections are off the scale, I feel. Again, the kind of staccato guitar riffs and the rhythm sections and the bit of a drum solo and Gillan's voice. Then you've got the 2 shorter tracks, Into the Fire and Living Wreck. Again, Living Wreck's got a great riff, great reverb and echo on the drums. But a bit like Child in Time, the song that sets this up as being, like, to me, one of the most exciting rock albums ever, that because of the production has set it apart. In a way, it sounded dated when it came out in some ways compared with the polish of the mid-70s, late 70s and the 80s. But in a way now it sounds unique and it sounds more newer now than it did then. Which brings us to this song called Hard Loving Man. This again starts with a kind of crash-held chord, and then we're often running with this galloping riff, which has been used so many times since, and it's seen as like a standard kind of rock heavy metal rhythm. But then I hadn't heard anything like it, and it's so heavy. The keyboard, the John Lord's organ sound is vicious. It's evil sounding. It's kind of discordant. And the instrumental sections are just fantastic, but where it really goes to a place now, when you listen to it now, even if you're my age now that I was then, it just sounds amazing when Blackmore starts to torture his guitar and literally try and pull the tremolo off as best he can, and true stereo, boys and girls, not this kind of 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock situation when you can't really tell if anything's mono or stereo anymore because everything's mixed for phones and iPods and stuff. Then stereo meant one guitar over there, and sometimes it will be over there, and literally you've got the guitar going from one speaker to the next, literally like 7 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon if it was a clock, literally as far wide as you can possibly think, just through the headphones. So exciting. And then the guitar sounds like it's falling down a mountainside, and there's even like a drop of water coming out of a tap at the end. It's just, and you're exhausted. An absolutely monumental piece of rock history and one of the cornerstones of rock music. Deep Purple in rock. Before I sign off, I'm just going to show you some of the stuff that I've quickly brought up in front of me. So in this part of the video, we just look at the stuff, and just to give you some background, and then I'll carry on with my reminiscing of the album at the end of this. But this was the first version I bought. You've got to remember, in the 70s, kids, a lot of us bought pre-recorded cassettes to play on cassette players because we didn't even have cassette recorders, because we didn't have record players of our own. This was seen as the shiny new thing on the block, and everybody wanted to have a cassette. So, as I said, I went out to buy Machine Head and came home with this. And bearing in mind that even on the Machine Head, cassette, which I did eventually buy, there was no pictures in cassettes. So this was all you knew about your new idols. That. The other thing that was different was the running order. The running order on the cassette was complete reverse of the album. So side 1 was Flight of the Rat, whereas of course on vinyl that was side 2. So you can imagine how confused I was when I did eventually get the vinyl. I was so used to playing it this way around, but that was it, look. That's it. No pictures, nothing. Just the song titles and who wrote it, and it was available on an 8-track cartridge, and that was your lot. And you can see that this has been played to death. It's a bit wounded now. So I try to think what that sounds like. But that was my entry point. The next thing, of course, was getting, as I got into records, was actually finding from October 1970, and this was a ex-jukebox version of Black Knight, which was played in all the school discos and all the discos of the time, usually with Paranoid or All Right Now played soon afterwards. And again, think about how marketing has changed. This was not on the album. That seems mad now, doesn't it? You buy the album, does it include the single? No. Because in those days, people thought if you bought the album, you've already got the single. That's how confident they were that you would do that. So one of my first vinyl albums when I did switch from cassette was Deep Purple in Rock. And this time I saw some more pictures of my idols. And again, I had the lyrics this time. I had more detail of what was happening here. And I also, this isn't the original inner sleeve here, but this is my album which I bought in the early 70s, and it's on vinyl so thick that it's almost impossible to bend. Before people were obsessing about 180 gram vinyl, and before the oil crisis in the 70s, this was rock solid. I mean, it's about 4 times as thick as the Montrose album from literally 73. And this one is from, I think, the late 70s, the 80s, and I bought that because it was a spare one, and I found it in a charity shop in mint condition. And I kind of felt like I was rescuing it. As a budding guitarist, I also bought the songbook, which was coupled up with songs from Fireball as well. It had some pictures in which were new to me at the time. No other pictures, and then just the sheet music, which sheet music in those days just did the melody and a lot else. Also, and there were some more pictures of the band live, which was great to find as well. Again, because in those days you were starved of live pictures of the bands you liked unless they appeared in the music press. Deep Purple. The other, and so the one I would recommend. Oh, and I did have a little button badge as well, which I wore on my denim jacket for years. The one I would recommend CD wise is this one, the anniversary edition, which it seems so old now because it's 1995. It's truth, heading towards being a fair vintage itself. But this had a piano version of Speed King, Cry Free, the outtake, Roger Glover remixed it, Jam Stew, unreleased instrumental, Flight of the Rat, Roger Glover remix, Speed King, Roger Glover remix, and Black Knight, the unedited version, which has an extended guitar solo. You do think one day the whole thing could be remixed, and that would be really exciting. And this came with a great booklet, and anything that Simon Robinson was involved in, he crammed in as much text as he possibly could, because he had all access to the band plus all his fanzines and stuff, so everything you'd need to know. But as you could expect with Simon Robinson, there was so much more to say. So much more to say. In fact, there was so much more to say that he did say it in this book, which I highly recommend. He's supposed to be working on a Machine Head version called Fire in the Sky, I believe. But this book, Wait for the Ricochet, which is a weighty tome, is all about Deep Purple in rock. Seriously, this book is just about that. That's an Ian Gillan lyric book that seems to have gotten here by accident. And this goes, and again, look at the font. Simon just thinks, well, can I, how big a book can I make? And yes, it goes through some history of the band, obviously, to get to In Rock. Nothing wrong with that. And then rehearsing and stuff, and then we're in. And this goes through everything you could possibly want to know about Deep Purple in rock is in this book. All the photos are, every photo from that period is in here. I'm obviously, for me, I'd seen nearly all of them, but there was still a lot I hadn't seen. And I dip into this book a lot. Why? Because I just feel it gives me extra background to an album that I've lived with for absolutely decades. So the whole story, the tours, what they were doing, absolutely brilliant stuff. I'm not going to spend too long on here, but for people like me that just love detail, to have a book dedicated to one record. I mean, I was hoping that, I suppose time permitting, that Simon could do something like this for Machine Head or other ones. But again, it takes so much time. And of course, you have to remember that In Rock was such a pivotal album to do with progressive heavy metal that there's a lot of source material to look at. Whereas later on, of course, albums were coming out every 6 months and the story behind them isn't as deep or as vast. But this is a great book, and I wanted to include it with my In Rock kind of classic rock review, because I felt that if you are a fan, this might be something in different territories that you're unaware of, and it's definitely worth tracking down. And at the back there's like pictures of all the different versions of In Rock you could possibly try and track down for your entertainment. So that's Deep Purple In Rock. And last but not least, because I almost forgot, this is another version of In Rock that I have on CD. And it's one of these Japanese vinyl replica CDs, which I have a soft spot for. I think the Japanese do this kind of stuff so well. I hope, it'd be great if British CD manufacturers and record labels had this same attention to detail, but I think we're too long into the process now to actually see that. But the Japanese issues like this, they always have gatefold sleeve, and they literally mimic everything that the vinyl one had. They're always based on the American release, and this one is, I think it's on the Warner's label, as it would have been, so not Harvest. And then you get the information in glorious Japanese and also English with all the lyrics again. So that's another version that I really like. So that's a look through Deep Purple in rock and my first thoughts and what it was like back then to own this record. Is that a cheesy album cover? I don't know if it is, but back then that was the only thing I had to tell me who they were, and the fact they were etched into a mountainside was good enough for me. Deep Purple in rock. As ever, an album cover described exactly what you were going to hear inside. And that was, we talked about Rainbow Rising recently, but this is another one to me that just says everything that needs to be said about Deep Purple at this point in time. It was groundbreaking. It really was. They weren't following anybody. If Blackmore was thinking he needed a vocalist like Robert Plant because of what Led Zeppelin were doing on this, after listening to John Lord's explorations into classical music with a concerto, a group and orchestra, this was Blackmore's turn. And obviously, as we went through life and I understood more about this, I understand that this was Ritchie Blackmore, and this was one of the key points of Deep Purple's history. And if you're getting into Deep Purple, you need to listen to this album. You need to own this album. That's the version to have on CD. It sounds awesome. Perhaps one day they'll remix the whole album, but this grungy sounding piece of metal rock history is an essential listen. It's absolutely marvellous. So thank you for watching, thank you for being here, thank you for subscribing and ringing that little bell, and stay safe, keep spinning those records, and I shall see you on my next video.